You're a liability, Margaret, a relic from the fax machine era. Bradley Thornton III said it while checking his Rolex, not even bothering to look me in the eye. The mahogany boardroom smelled like old money and fresh cologne, the kind that costs $200 an ounce and announces itself before you enter a room. He was 31 years old, trust fund, Harvard MBA, the kind of jaw that comes from generations of selective breeding and expensive dentistry. His suit was Brioni, his tie was Hermes, his confidence was inherited from a grandfather who had his name on the building we were sitting in. I sat across from him with my hands folded on the table, watching him admire his own reflection in the polished wood. I didn't flinch, I didn't cry. I didn't do the thing most people do when they're being discarded like yesterday's Wall Street Journal. After 23 years in compliance, you learn that the people who underestimate you are usually the ones who end up paying for it. But let me back up, because that moment, humiliating as it was, didn't happen by accident. It happened because Bradley Thornton III had never bothered to learn what I actually did, and what I did was going to cost his family everything. I'm Margaret Chen. I'm the Senior Compliance Director at Thornton & Associates, which sounds prestigious until you realize it mostly means I'm the person who keeps investment bankers from going to prison. That might sound like an exaggeration. It's not. Investment banking is a world of temptation, millions of dollars flowing through accounts every hour, clients who want discretion more than they want disclosure, regulations that change faster than anyone can track them. Without compliance, this industry would eat itself alive within a week. My job is simple on paper. I review transactions, I verify client identities, I ensure we're not accidentally laundering money for drug cartels or helping oligarchs hide stolen assets or facilitating tax evasion schemes that would make the IRS weep. I read the Bank Secrecy Act reports. I file the suspicious activity reports. I answer the questions that regulators ask at 3 a.m. because financial crimes don't respect business hours. For 23 years, I've been the invisible guardian of this firm's reputation, the one who reads every filing, the one who flags every suspicious pattern, the one who knows which clients are legitimate and which ones are trying to turn dirty money into clean investments. I stay late on Fridays when everyone else is at happy hour because the SEC doesn't care about your weekend plans. I work Christmas Eve because criminal enterprises don't take holidays. I answer my phone at midnight because wire transfers happen in time zones where midnight is the middle of the business day. The compliance department at Thornton occupies the basement level, literally the basement. While the traders work in glass offices with panoramic skyline views, while the executives have corner suites with private bars and original artwork, we sit underground in fluorescent lighting that makes everyone look vaguely ill. The carpet is industrial gray and hasn't been replaced since 2009. I know because I was here when they installed it, and I've watched it slowly surrender to foot traffic and coffee stains. The coffee machine only works if you hit it twice on the left side, pause, then hit it once on the right. Nobody knows why, nobody questions it. We just do it. The ceiling tiles have water stains from a leak that maintenance has been investigating for 3 years. Every time it rains, we put out buckets. Every time we complain, we get emails about scheduled repairs that never happen. This is where the firm puts compliance. Out of sight, out of mind. Necessary but not celebrated. Essential but not valued. But here's what the people upstairs don't understand. Down here in the basement, we know everything. I know which partners have gambling problems and use company accounts to cover their losses. I know which traders are skimming from client portfolios and hoping nobody notices. I know which clients are fronts for organizations that would make your blood freeze if you knew their real names. I know who's having affairs because I see the expense reports. I know who's drinking too much because I see the corporate card charges. I know who's about to get divorced because I see the asset movements. And most importantly, I know where every piece of documentation lives. Every filing, every signature, every timestamp, every record of every transaction that's ever moved through this firm. 23 years of institutional knowledge stored in filing systems that I designed and databases that I built and protocols that I created when this firm was still operating out of a single floor with dreams of expansion. The compliance database runs on a proprietary verification system I designed 15 years ago. Let me explain what that means, because it's important. In financial compliance, you can't just track transactions. You have to verify them. Every wire transfer needs a paper trail. Every client needs identity confirmation. Every suspicious pattern needs documentation. And all of it needs to be accessible at a moment's notice, because when regulators come knocking, they don't wait. 15 years ago, our system was a mess. Paper files, scattered databases, no integration, no standardization. Finding a single transaction record could take hours. Proving compliance during an audit was like trying to solve a puzzle where half the pieces were missing. I built something better, on my own time, using my own expertise. Nights and weekends for 18 months, coding and designing and testing while everyone else went home. The system I created could verify any transaction in seconds, could generate compliance reports automatically, could flag suspicious patterns before they became problems, could do the work of 20 analysts in the time it takes to make a cup of coffee. When I proposed it to the firm, they were skeptical. Another basement dweller with delusions of innovation. When I demonstrated it, they were impressed. This actually worked. This was actually better. When I offered to license it to them rather than sell it outright, they were desperate enough to agree. That's the key part. License, not sell. The license is tied to my employment, specifically to my employment in good standing with the firm. If I'm terminated without cause, if someone decides I'm too old or too slow or too much of a relic from a previous era, the license reverts to me. Without that system, Thornton and Associates can't verify a single transaction, can't file a single report, can't prove compliance with a single regulation. They'd be operating blind in an industry where blindness isn't just a disadvantage, it's a felony. Wire fraud, money laundering, regulatory violations that carry prison sentences and fines that would bankrupt a medium-sized country. I told exactly one person about this arrangement when I signed it. Arthur Thornton, the founder, Bradley's grandfather. Arthur was old school, in the best way. He'd built this firm from nothing, starting with a single desk and a telephone and a determination that bordered on obsessive. He understood that expertise has value. He understood that people aren't replaceable just because they don't have corner offices. When I showed him the licensing agreement, he read it twice. Then he looked at me over his reading glasses with those sharp eyes that had spotted 1,000 opportunities and 1,000 frauds, and he smiled. "Smart woman," he said. "Very smart. My grandson should be so clever." Arthur died 4 years ago. Heart attack, in his office, doing what he loved. The agreement stayed. Buried in legal archives that nobody reads, documented in files that nobody opens, waiting like a loaded weapon for someone stupid enough to pull the trigger. Enter Bradley Thornton III, the prince who would be king, the heir who thought inheritance was the same as earning. Let me tell you about Bradley Thornton III, because you need to understand exactly what we're dealing with here. Bradley wasn't qualified for leadership. Bradley was anointed for it. His bloodline was his resume, his last name was his credential, his trust fund was his safety net. He'd never built anything, never struggled for anything, never faced a moment in his life where the outcome wasn't predetermined by the circumstances of his birth. He arrived at the firm 6 months ago, fresh from a boutique consulting gig where his primary responsibility had been not embarrassing his family at client dinners, and he'd failed at that. There were stories, drunken speeches, inappropriate comments, the kind of behavior that gets normal people fired, but gets Thorntons transferred to different departments. The board gave him the title of Executive Vice President of Strategic Operations. Try saying that 3 times fast.
It means nothing. It's the title you give someone when you need them to have a title, but you don't trust them with actual responsibility. Bradley had an office bigger than my entire department, corner suite, private bathroom, views of Central Park that belonged on a postcard. He had an assistant whose primary job was managing his calendar and pretending he was busy. He showed up on his first day in that Brioni suit, the one that cost more than most people's monthly rent. He had a Mont Blanc pen he'd never actually use because who writes anything by hand anymore? He had ideas. Oh, did he have ideas. "We're going to modernize this firm," he announced at the all-hands meeting, standing at the podium like he was accepting an award for achievements he hadn't yet achieved. He had slides, professional slides with graphics and bullet points, and the kind of corporate language that sounds meaningful until you actually think about it. "We've been doing things the same way for too long. It's time to move faster. Cut the fat, streamline operations, embrace innovation, disrupt ourselves before someone else disrupts us." Disrupt ourselves. He actually said that, like it was wisdom, like it was insight, like he'd invented the concept of change. I stood in the back, arms crossed, watching the senior partners exchange nervous glances. They'd seen this before, the new generation arriving with buzzwords and enthusiasm and absolutely no understanding of why things worked the way they worked. Cutting the fat meant cutting people. Streamlining operations meant eliminating the things you don't understand. Embracing innovation meant buying software and firing the humans it was supposed to replace. His first month, Bradley eliminated the training budget entirely. $0 for professional development, $0 for continuing education, $0 for the certifications that our industry requires. His reasoning, as such it was, went like this. Experienced employees should already know their jobs. They shouldn't need training, and inexperienced employees should learn faster. Trial by fire, sink or swim. The kind of philosophy that sounds tough but is actually just lazy. The junior analysts started making mistakes almost immediately, small ones at first, missing deadlines, misfiling documents, confusing clients with similar names, the kind of errors that experienced staff had to fix, usually at 10 p.m. on a Friday, usually without thanks. Nobody connected the dots. Nobody said, maybe we should have trained these people. They just blamed the analysts and wondered why morale was collapsing. His second month, Bradley outsourced the IT help desk to a company in Southeast Asia. The company was cheap. That was its primary qualification. Cheap. Response times went from minutes to days. Tickets went unanswered. Systems crashed and stayed crashed because nobody local knew how to fix them and nobody remote understood the context. 3 different platforms went down in a single week. Trading was halted for 6 hours on a Tuesday because someone overseas reset the wrong server. Bradley called it a temporary adjustment period. The partners called it a disaster, but they didn't do anything about it because Bradley was a Thornton, and Thorntons weren't questioned. Thorntons weren't challenged. Thorntons were accommodated until their mistakes became too expensive to ignore. His third month, he came for compliance. "I've been reviewing departmental budgets," he said, cornering me in my basement office. The fluorescent lights hummed above us. His cologne fought with the smell of old paper and older coffee. 23% of our operational overhead. That's unacceptable. We need to reduce headcount by 40% and automate the rest. I looked at him. Really looked at him. He had the eyes of someone who'd never been told no, the posture of someone who'd never faced consequences. Compliance isn't overhead. Compliance is what keeps this firm out of federal court. You can't automate judgment. You can't outsource institutional knowledge. Every person in my department knows things that software can't learn. Bradley smiled, the kind of smile that shows too many teeth and not enough understanding. "Margaret, I appreciate your passion. I really do. It's very dedicated. But the world has changed. AI can do what your team does faster and cheaper. We're not in the business of sentimentality. We're in the business of not going to prison. That requires people who understand nuance, who recognize patterns, who know when something feels wrong even when it looks right on paper. Feelings aren't strategy. He actually said that, like it was something he'd read on a motivational poster. Data is strategy, and the data says your department is bloated. I didn't argue. I'd been in this industry long enough to know that arguing with someone's ego is like arguing with the weather, pointless and exhausting. 3 weeks later, Bradley fired 8 of my 12 staff members. 8 people, 8 careers, 8 families, gone in a single afternoon. My most experienced analysts, people who had been with the firm for a decade or more, people who had caught frauds and flagged violations and saved the firm hundreds of millions in potential fines. Sarah Martinez, who could spot a shell company from 3 data points and a gut feeling, gone. David Kim, who had memorized every SEC regulation from the past 15 years, gone. Jennifer Okonkwo, who had personally prevented a money laundering scheme that would have made international headlines, gone.
All of them replaced by a software subscription, $40,000 a month for an AI system that promised to revolutionize compliance operations and leverage machine learning for pattern detection. The software was garbage. It crashed every time it encountered a transaction it didn't understand, which was most transactions. It flagged legitimate clients as suspicious and waved through obvious frauds. It generated reports that were technically accurate and practically useless. But it was cheap. Cheaper than people, cheaper than expertise, cheaper than institutional knowledge that took decades to accumulate. Bradley didn't see a problem. Bradley saw savings. Quarterly reports, numbers that would impress the board and justify his existence. I documented everything, every warning I gave, every risk I identified, every email where I explained exactly why this was dangerous and exactly what would go wrong. I kept copies at home, in a safe deposit box at a bank that wasn't Thornton, in a cloud drive that nobody at the firm knew existed, in encrypted files that only I could access, not because I was planning revenge, not because I was plotting his downfall, because I was planning survival, because I knew, with the certainty of 23 years in this industry, that this was going to end badly, and when it did, I wanted proof that I'd tried to stop it. Now, before I tell you how Bradley Thornton III discovered that blood isn't thicker than regulatory compliance, do me a favor. If you're enjoying this story, if you want to see how a basement-dwelling compliance officer brought down a financial dynasty, hit that subscribe button and drop a like. Seriously, it takes 2 seconds. And trust me, you're going to want to hear what happens when a 31-year-old trust fund prince learns that the SEC doesn't care who your grandfather was. The collapse is coming, and it's spectacular. Back to the disaster. The quarterly audit was scheduled for a Thursday in October. This wasn't a routine review. This was federal examiners, SEC, FINRA, FinCEN, the alphabet soup of regulatory agencies that can shut down operations with a single finding. I'd been preparing for weeks, gathering documentation, organizing files, making sure every transaction was verified and every report was filed, and every I was dotted and every T was crossed. My team, what remained of it, worked 12-hour days. We checked and double-checked and triple-checked because we knew what was at stake. But at 8:47 a.m., 13 minutes before the examiners arrived, Bradley called me to his corner office. The walk from the basement to the executive floor takes 4 minutes if you hurry. I didn't hurry. I knew what was coming. I'd known for weeks. His office was obscene. That's the only word for it. 2,000 square feet of mahogany and leather and original artwork that cost more than my house. Windows floor to ceiling with views of Manhattan that made you feel like you were floating above the city. He wasn't alone. Victoria Hayes from HR was there, sitting in a chair that probably cost more than her monthly salary. She looked uncomfortable. She always looked uncomfortable when she had to do Bradley's dirty work. Robert Kim from security stood by the door, holding a cardboard box. My cardboard box, already packed. They'd gone through my desk while I was on my way up. The Manhattan skyline stretched behind Bradley like a painting he'd inherited instead of earned. He didn't stand up when I entered, didn't offer me a seat, just gestured vaguely toward a chair and kept scrolling through his phone. 23 years of service, and he couldn't be bothered to look me in the eye. "Margaret," he finally said, setting the phone down like it was costing him something.
We're making some changes to the compliance structure. Effective immediately, your position has been eliminated. I didn't sit. The examiners arrive in 13 minutes, and they'll be met by our new compliance consultant, Derek Simmons, younger, more current, better aligned with our technology-forward approach. Derek Simmons. I knew the name. It echoed in my memory like a punchline I'd forgotten. He'd applied to our department 2 years ago, fresh out of a master's program, confident, eager, completely unqualified. He couldn't explain the difference between KYC and AML protocols, didn't understand beneficial ownership requirements, thought SAR filing was something you did at a car dealership. We'd passed on him unanimously. Every interviewer had written some version of not ready or needs significant development, or in my case, lacks fundamental understanding of regulatory requirements. Apparently, he'd found Bradley, found someone who valued confidence over competence, found someone who didn't know enough to recognize when someone else didn't know enough. "You're firing me," I said flatly. "On audit day?" "We're restructuring," Victoria corrected, clutching a folder like it might protect her from what was happening. "Your severance package is extremely generous. 18 months, full benefits, a positive reference." Bradley leaned back in his chair, watching me with something that might have been satisfaction, the look of a cat that's caught a mouse and wants to play with it before the kill. "Look, Margaret, you've had a good run. 23 years is a long time, longer than I've been alive, actually." He laughed at his own joke. Nobody else did. "But the industry has moved past your skill set. We need people who can adapt, who can move at the pace of modern finance, who aren't stuck in the past." He said it with such certainty, such absolute confidence that he was right and I was wrong, that the natural order of things involved him in that chair and me out on the street. I looked at him for a long moment, at the suit that cost more than my car, at the watch that cost more than my salary, at the arrogance that cost more than he would ever understand. Then I smiled. "Where do I sign?" The relief on their faces was almost beautiful. They expected tears, arguments, begging. What they got was a 61-year-old woman who understood something they never would. The best revenge isn't something you take, it's something you've already built. I signed the termination papers. I took the box, and I walked out of the building at 8:58 a.m., 2 minutes before the federal examiners walked in. My phone buzzed in the elevator, an automated alert from my licensing server. The compliance verification system had detected that the primary administrator was no longer an active employee.
Protocol 7 had activated. The system was locking down. I stepped out onto Park Avenue, hailed a cab, and gave the driver my address. The morning traffic was light for Manhattan. We made it to Queens in under an hour. Then I opened my tablet and watched the chaos begin. The compliance verification system has a monitoring dashboard. I built it, I maintained it, and I still had access to it, because the access wasn't tied to my employment. It was tied to my license, and my license was now very much mine again. The first sign of trouble came at 9:23 a.m. The federal examiners, all 5 of them, had settled into the conference room with coffee and laptops and the grim efficiency of people who do this for a living. They requested access to transaction verification records, standard procedure, the first item on a checklist that would take 3 days to complete. Derek Simmons, the new compliance consultant, tried to log into the system. I watched the attempt register on my dashboard. Username, D. Simmons. Password, attempted. Access, denied. He tried again. I watched him try again. Different password this time. Same result. Access, denied. He called IT. I could imagine the conversation. "The system isn't letting me in. Have you tried restarting?" "Yes." "Have you tried a different browser?" "Yes." "Have you tried clearing your cache?" None of it would help. IT couldn't help because the system wasn't broken. It was functioning exactly as designed. It was doing precisely what I'd built it to do. When I was terminated, the licensing protocol activated. The system ran a verification check, confirmed that the primary administrator was no longer employed in good standing, and initiated lockdown procedures. It didn't crash,
It didn't display errors. It simply no longer recognized anyone at Thornton and Associates as authorized to access it. The digital equivalent of changing the locks after someone moves out. By 10:15 a.m., the examiners had stopped asking questions and started making calls. I watched the access logs. 15 more login attempts from various IP addresses, all denied. Someone tried to access the system through a backup interface, denied. Someone tried to reset the administrator credentials through the database backend, denied. The system was thorough. I'd made it thorough. By 11:30 a.m., the SEC examiner, a woman named Patricia Kowalski, who had a reputation for being fair but merciless, had issued a preliminary finding of non-compliance. Thornton and Associates couldn't produce documentation for a single transaction from the past 18 months. Not one. Not because the documentation didn't exist, it existed. Every record was intact, every file was preserved, but nobody could access the system that verified it. It was like having a vault full of gold, but no one who knew the combination. By 1 p.m., the examiners had escalated to Enforcement Division. The words potential material violations appeared in the official correspondence. By 3 p.m., they'd issued a regulatory hold on all trading operations. Every transaction frozen, every account locked, every client trapped in a system that couldn't verify their existence. Bradley's first call came at 2 p.m. I let it go to voicemail. "Margaret, call me back. There's been some kind of technical issue. I'm sure we can work something out." Technical issue, like the system had simply malfunctioned, like it was a glitch that anyone could fix if they just turned it on and off again. His second call came at 4 p.m. His voice was tighter this time. The confidence was starting to crack. "Margaret, this is serious. The examiners are threatening enforcement action. We need to resolve this immediately. Call me." His third call came at 11 p.m. I was in bed, reading a mystery novel I'd been meaning to finish for months. The phone rang. I looked at the caller ID. Bradley Thornton III. I let it ring 4 times before answering. He sounded like a different person. The smooth confidence was gone. The patrician condescension was gone. What remained was fear, pure and simple. The fear of someone who's watching their world collapse and doesn't understand why. "Margaret, please, I don't understand what's happening. The system won't let anyone in. We've tried everything. The examiners have frozen our accounts pending investigation. We can't process any transactions. We can't verify any clients. We can't file any reports. Please, I'm begging you, tell me what's happening. Tell me how to fix this." I let the silence stretch, long enough for him to hear his own breathing, long enough for the weight of the moment to settle. "The licensing agreement is in the legal archives, Section 7, Paragraph 3. I suggest you read it." Then I hung up and went to sleep, the best sleep I'd had in years. Day 2 was worse for them, much worse. The SEC issued a formal inquiry notice at 8 a.m., not a request, a demand. Produce documentation or face enforcement action. Regulatory hold on all trading operations. Every transaction frozen, every account locked, every client trapped in a system that couldn't verify their existence. The financial press picked up the story by noon. They're vultures, financial journalists. They can smell blood from 100 miles away. Bloomberg ran a headline, "Thornton and Associates faces regulatory freeze amid compliance failure." The Wall Street Journal called it a compliance catastrophe unprecedented in the firm's 90-year history. CNBC had a panel discussion where 3 experts debated whether the firm could survive. Bradley tried to hire outside consultants to crack the system. He brought in cybersecurity experts, forensic accountants, a team from a Big 4 consulting firm that charged $15,000 an hour. They couldn't crack it. Not because it was encrypted, though it was. Not because it was protected, though it was. Because it was proprietary. I'd built it from the ground up. I'd documented nothing externally. I'd retained all licensing rights. The only person who understood how it worked was sitting in Queens, drinking tea and reading mystery novels. Day 3, the clients started leaving. Hedge funds, pension managers, family offices that had been with Thornton for generations. They couldn't afford to be associated with a firm under regulatory investigation. Their own compliance departments were screaming. Their own lawyers were demanding answers. One by one, they transferred assets, closed accounts, sent legal teams to recover documentation. The exodus was methodical and merciless. First, it was the newer clients, the ones who joined in the past 5 years. Then it was the medium-term relationships, 10 years, 15 years. Then it was the old guard, families who'd been with Thornton since Arthur founded the firm. Eleanor Thornton, Arthur's widow, texted me on day 3. The Harrington family just pulled out. They've been clients since 1987. Bradley's father is having chest pains. I texted back, "Tell him to see a doctor." The numbers became real very quickly. $2.3 billion in assets under management, frozen or fleeing. That's billion with a B. That's lifetimes of accumulated wealth walking out the door because one 31-year-old couldn't be bothered to understand what compliance actually meant. $47 million in potential regulatory fines. The SEC doesn't play around. Material violations carry material consequences. 14 client relationships representing 60% of annual revenue terminated or terminating. The lifeblood of the firm hemorrhaging in real time. The stock wasn't publicly traded, but the partnership shares were valued quarterly. The value dropped 38% in 3 days. Partners who'd spent their careers building equity watched it evaporate like morning dew on hot asphalt. The board called an emergency session on day 4. I know because Eleanor Thornton texted me updates in real time. She'd always liked me. She'd always thought her grandson was an idiot. Now she had proof, documented and devastating. "They're eating him alive in there," she wrote at 10:15 a.m. His father tried to defend him. The other partners shut him down. They want blood. "How much blood?" I texted back. "All of it. They're talking about forcing him out, about restructuring the entire executive team, about whether the firm can survive this." I texted back a single emoji, the one with the face sipping tea. Bradley's final call came at midnight on day 4. I was awake, reading in bed, waiting. I knew he'd call. I knew it would be late. Desperation doesn't respect business hours. The phone rang. I let it ring 3 times, then I answered. Margaret. His voice was hoarse, raw, stripped of every pretension, every affectation, every carefully cultivated layer of patrician confidence. This was what Bradley Thornton III sounded like when the safety net disappeared. "I don't know what to do." He said it simply, directly, without the usual armor of corporate speak. "The board is meeting tomorrow. Final vote. My own family is going to vote me out. My father won't look at me. My mother is pretending this isn't happening. My grandfather's portrait is hanging in the boardroom, and every time I look at it, I see disappointment." He paused. I could hear him breathing. Fast, shallow. The breathing of someone drowning in consequences. "I've lost everything. The clients, the trust, the reputation. Everything my family built. Everything my grandfather spent his life creating. I've destroyed it in 6 months because I was arrogant, because I thought I knew better, because I looked at you and saw someone obsolete instead of someone essential." I let the silence stretch, let him sit with the weight of his own words. "Margaret, please, tell me what you want. I'll do anything. I'll give you anything. Just tell me how to fix this." I took a breath. This was the moment I'd been waiting for. Not with anticipation, not with glee, with the quiet satisfaction of someone who'd been proven right in the most expensive way possible. "Bradley," I said, "the licensing agreement is clear. The system reverts to me upon termination without cause. If you want to restore access, you'll need to negotiate with me directly." "Name your price," he said immediately. "Whatever you want. Stock, cash, a seat on the board, partnership. I'll make you a senior partner, full equity stake, whatever it takes." I don't want stock. I don't want cash. I don't want a seat at a table that never valued me when I was sitting at it. Then what? What do you want? I want a public acknowledgement, a statement from the board admitting that my termination was a mistake, admitting that compliance expertise cannot be automated, admitting that institutional knowledge has value that can't be measured in quarterly reports. Done, he breathed. Absolutely done. What else? I want every employee you fired rehired. Sarah Martinez, David Kim, Jennifer Okonkwo, all of them. Full back pay, restored benefits, and written apologies from you personally. Silence. Then, fine. Yes, of course. What else? I want you to resign, publicly, with a statement acknowledging that you weren't qualified for the position you were given, that nepotism isn't merit, that legacy doesn't equal leadership, that the name Thornton means nothing if the person carrying it doesn't deserve it. The silence on his end stretched so long I thought the call had dropped. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely a whisper. You're asking me to destroy my family's reputation. No, I said. You destroyed that. You destroyed it the moment you fired qualified people and replaced them with software. You destroyed it the moment you decided that 23 years of expertise was worth less than a $40,000 subscription. You destroyed it every day for 6 months while you played at being an executive. I paused. I'm not asking you to destroy anything. I'm asking you to acknowledge what you've done. There's a difference. Destruction is your work. Acknowledgement is your redemption. Whether you choose redemption is up to you. My grandfather? I interrupted. Your grandfather hired me. Your grandfather understood that expertise has value. Your grandfather would be ashamed of what you've done to his legacy. Don't invoke his memory to justify your failures. The line was silent except for his breathing. You have until the board meeting tomorrow. Those are my terms, non-negotiable. Accept them or don't. Either way, the system stays locked until I decide otherwise. I hung up before he could respond. Then I turned off my phone, finished my tea, and went to sleep. Tomorrow would be interesting. The board met at 9 a.m. Eleanor kept me updated in real time. Text messages every few minutes. Sometimes just a word, sometimes a whole paragraph. I could tell she was enjoying this. 20 years of watching her grandson coast on the family name, and finally someone had held him accountable. It was, in her words, the most satisfying bloodbath she'd ever witnessed. Bradley's father, Richard Thornton Jr., tried to defend his son, talked about family legacy, second chances, learning opportunities, the value of keeping things in the family. Nobody was buying it. The other partners had seen the numbers: $2.3 billion in fleeing assets, $47 million in potential fines, 60% of revenue walking out the door. They'd calculated exactly how much Bradley's 6 months of leadership had cost them, and the figure had too many zeros to forgive. Senior partner Morrison delivered the summary. 23 years of regulatory compliance destroyed. 90 years of client relationships jeopardized. A reputation that took generations to build shattered in months. This isn't about family. This is about survival. And right now, Bradley is the reason we might not survive. The vote wasn't close. 9-2, with Richard abstaining because apparently even he couldn't vote in favor of his own son after seeing the damage reports. By 11 a.m., Bradley had resigned. The press release called it a personal decision to pursue other interests. The truth was simpler and uglier. His own family had thrown him out before he could finish sinking the ship they'd spent 90 years building. By noon, the new interim CEO, a woman named Rachel Morrison, who'd been CFO for 8 years and actually understood both numbers and nuance, called me personally. Ms. Chen. Her voice was warm but professional, the voice of someone who had inherited a disaster and was systematically working through the cleanup. I believe we have a great deal to discuss. Would you be available to come to the office this afternoon?
I could be available, I said.
depending on the terms. The terms, she said, are whatever it takes to restore this firm's functionality. We've learned an expensive lesson about the value of expertise. I'd rather not learn it again. 3 hours later, I was in a conference room signing a new agreement, the same conference room where Bradley had fired me 5 days earlier, the same mahogany table, the same skyline views. Different circumstances entirely. The agreement was different, better, much better. It included a consulting fee that made Bradley's salary look like pocket money, 7 figures, annual, with quarterly bonuses tied to regulatory compliance scores. It included the rehiring of every terminated employee, Sarah, David, Jennifer, all 8 of them, full back pay for the months they'd been unemployed, restored benefits, promotions to recognize their expertise, written apologies from the firm signed by every partner. It included a seat on the Compliance Oversight Committee, not a ceremonial seat, a real seat, with veto power over any future technology decisions that affected regulatory compliance. Any change to the systems I'd built required my written approval, my signature, my permission. And it included something else, something I hadn't asked for but Rachel had offered anyway, a corner office on the executive floor, with windows, with views, with a door I could close and a nameplate I'd earned. I wasn't going back to the basement, not ever again. I signed the agreement at 4 p.m. By 4:15, the compliance verification system was back online, the lockdown lifted, access restored, documentation available. By 5 p.m., Rachel was on the phone with the SEC, providing the records they'd requested 5 days earlier. The investigation was expedited. The findings were revised. Material violations became procedural irregularities. Enforcement action became compliance monitoring. The fines were minimal, $2.3 million instead of $47 million, a slap on the wrist instead of a knockout punch. The regulators were satisfied. The partners were relieved. The clients who'd fled or contacted personally. Most of them came back. Not all. Some relationships were too damaged, some trust was too broken, but most of them came back because 90 years of reputation doesn't disappear overnight, even when a 31-year-old trust fund prince tries his best to destroy it. The partners held a firm-wide meeting the week after Bradley's resignation. Rachel stood at the podium where Bradley had once announced his plans to modernize and streamline and disrupt. Her message was different. "We made a mistake," she said simply. "We elevated someone who wasn't ready. We ignored expertise. We treated compliance as overhead instead of infrastructure. And we nearly paid the ultimate price." She paused, looking around the room at the faces of people who had watched their firm nearly collapse. That changes today. From now on, expertise matters. Experience matters. The people who build our foundations matter. If you've been here for 20 years and someone half your age tells you that you're obsolete, I want you to come directly to me. Because in this firm, going forward, wisdom beats buzzwords every single time. The applause was genuine. The relief was palpable. The lesson, finally, had been learned. Eleanor Thornton invited me to tea the following week. We sat in her Park Avenue penthouse, surrounded by art that cost more than most houses, drinking Earl Grey from cups that belonged in a museum. The apartment was exactly what you'd expect from a Thornton. Old money taste, quiet elegance, nothing ostentatious, just quality so refined it didn't need to announce itself. "Arthur would have loved this," she said, smiling over her cup. Her eyes were bright, sharp, the eyes of someone who had seen a lot and forgotten nothing. He always said Bradley was a fool. He said it to me, privately, when Bradley was still in business school. "That boy has all the confidence and none of the judgment. He'll either learn humility or he'll destroy everything I've built." She sipped her tea. Turns out it was the second one. Almost. Your grandson made assumptions, I said. He assumed that age meant obsolescence, that technology could replace judgment, that his name would protect him from consequences. And now? I set my cup down carefully on its saucer. Bone china, probably worth more than my first car. The truth, I said. That's what compliance officers do. We tell the truth, documented and verified, whether people want to hear it or not. And what is the truth about my grandson? I thought about it for a moment, about Bradley in that corner office, so confident, so certain, so absolutely sure that the world would bend to accommodate him. The truth is that Bradley isn't evil. He's not malicious. He's not deliberately cruel. He's just never had to be competent. He's never had to earn anything. He's never faced a problem that couldn't be solved by the application of family money or family connections. I paused. The truth is that he might learn. He might grow. He might become something better than what he was when he fired me. But he'll only do that if someone lets him fail, if someone refuses to catch him, if someone makes him face the consequences of his actions without the safety net of the Thornton name. Eleanor nodded slowly. That's what I tell them, she said quietly. When they call me, when they ask if they should give him a chance, I tell them that the best thing anyone can do for Bradley is to make him earn it, whatever it is. Make him prove himself. Make him work for it. Does he listen? She smiled sadly. Not yet, but hope springs eternal. We finished our tea in comfortable silence, watching the afternoon light play across the park below. Bradley Thornton III got a job eventually. Took him 4 months. A small wealth management firm in Connecticut. Nothing prestigious, nothing with his name on the building, nothing with the kind of clients who'd heard of his grandfather or cared about his Harvard MBA. Last I heard, he was managing accounts for people who demanded results and expected competence, people who measured performance and expected competence, people who would fire him without hesitation if he didn't deliver.
I could be available, I said, depending on the terms. The terms, she said, are whatever it takes to restore this firm's functionality. We've learned an expensive lesson about the value of expertise. I'd rather not learn it again. 3 hours later, I was in a conference room signing a new agreement, the same conference room where Bradley had fired me 5 days earlier, the same mahogany table, the same skyline views, different circumstances entirely. The agreement was different, better, much better. It included a consulting fee that made Bradley's salary look like pocket money, 7 figures, annual, with quarterly bonuses tied to regulatory compliance scores. It included the rehiring of every terminated employee, Sarah, David, Jennifer, all 8 of them, full back pay for the months they'd been unemployed, restored benefits, promotions to recognize their expertise, written apologies from the firm signed by every partner. It included a seat on the Compliance Oversight Committee, not a ceremonial seat, a real seat, with veto power over any future technology decisions that affected regulatory compliance. Any change to the systems I'd built required my written approval, my signature, my permission. And it included something else, something I hadn't asked for but Rachel had offered anyway, a corner office on the executive floor, with windows, with views, with a door I could close and a nameplate I'd earned. I wasn't going back to the basement, not ever again. I signed the agreement at 4 p.m. By 4:15, the compliance verification system was back online, the lockdown lifted, access restored, documentation available. By 5 p.m., Rachel was on the phone with the SEC, providing the records they'd requested 5 days earlier. The investigation was expedited. The findings were revised. Material violations became procedural irregularities. Enforcement action became compliance monitoring. The fines were minimal.
$2.3 million instead of $47 million, a slap on the wrist instead of a knockout punch. The regulators were satisfied. The partners were relieved. The clients who'd fled or contacted personally. Most of them came back. Not all. Some relationships were too damaged. Some trust was too broken. But most of them came back because 90 years of reputation doesn't disappear overnight, even when a 31-year-old trust fund prince tries his best to destroy it. The partners held a firm-wide meeting the week after Bradley's resignation. Rachel stood at the podium where Bradley had once announced his plans to modernize and streamline and disrupt. Her message was different. "We made a mistake," she said simply. "We elevated someone who wasn't ready. We ignored expertise. We treated compliance as overhead instead of infrastructure. And we nearly paid the ultimate price." She paused, looking around the room at the faces of people who had watched their firm nearly collapse. That changes today. From now on, expertise matters. Experience matters. The people who build our foundations matter. If you've been here for 20 years and someone half your age tells you that you're obsolete, I want you to come directly to me. Because in this firm, going forward, wisdom beats buzzwords every single time. The applause was genuine. The relief was palpable. The lesson, finally, had been learned. Eleanor Thornton invited me to tea the following week. We sat in her Park Avenue penthouse, surrounded by art that cost more than most houses, drinking Earl Grey from cups that belonged in a museum. The apartment was exactly what you'd expect from a Thornton. Old money taste, quiet elegance, nothing ostentatious, just quality so refined it didn't need to announce itself. "Arthur would have loved this," she said, smiling over her cup. Her eyes were bright, sharp, the eyes of someone who had seen a lot and forgotten nothing. He always said Bradley was a fool. He said it to me, privately, when Bradley was still in business school. "That boy has all the confidence and none of the judgment. He'll either learn humility or he'll destroy everything I've built." She sipped her tea. Turns out it was the second one. Almost. "Your grandson made assumptions," I said. "He assumed that age meant obsolescence, that technology could replace judgment, that his name would protect him from consequences. And now?" I set my cup down carefully on its saucer. Bone china, probably worth more than my first car. "The truth," I said. "That's what compliance officers do. We tell the truth, documented and verified, whether people want to hear it or not." And what is the truth about my grandson? I thought about it for a moment, about Bradley in that corner office, so confident, so certain, so absolutely sure that the world would bend to accommodate him. The truth is that Bradley isn't evil. He's not malicious. He's not deliberately cruel. He's just never had to be competent. He's never had to earn anything. He's never faced a problem that couldn't be solved by the application of family money or family connections. I paused. The truth is that he might learn. He might grow. He might become something better than what he was when he fired me. But he'll only do that if someone lets him fail, if someone refuses to catch him, if someone makes him face the consequences of his actions without the safety net of the Thornton name. Eleanor nodded slowly. "That's what I tell them," she said quietly. "When they call me, when they ask if they should give him a chance, I tell them that the best thing anyone can do for Bradley is to make him earn it, whatever it is. Make him prove himself. Make him work for it." Does he listen? She smiled sadly. Not yet, but hope springs eternal. We finished our tea in comfortable silence, watching the afternoon light play across the park below. Bradley Thornton III got a job eventually. Took him 4 months. A small wealth management firm in Connecticut. Nothing prestigious, nothing with his name on the building, nothing with the kind of clients who'd heard of his grandfather or cared about his Harvard MBA. Last I heard, he was managing accounts for people who demanded results and expected competence, people who measured performance and expected competence, people who would fire him without hesitation if he didn't deliver.